Thank you guys for being on time. Everybody but the last person just came in as we were getting ready to start. I'm sorry. I had to. Come on. We're very happy that you chose out of 2,200 sessions to come and spend some time with us today talking about the Lightning migration. My name is Bob Furness, and I lead the Service Cloud practice for Blue Wolf, an IBM company. And to give a little bit more detail about that, we help companies implement Salesforce and are the partner of record with Autodesk, who is here today to participate as a customer and sort of give you a little bit of insight around that. I've been in the industry, and I've been at Blue Wolf for about 7.5 years and have been in the contact center space for 32 many years. My entire career has been connected around customer experience and customer service. So what Autodesk talks about today from the perspective of how it impacted their contact center and their service aspects and the customer connection is near and dear to what I do on a daily basis and what I've done the majority of my life. I love this stuff, and I'm glad to be here, and again, glad you're with us. Mike, if you could introduce yourself, maybe give a little bit of history.
Sure. Hi, my name is Mike Wong, and I'm a product manager at Autodesk. I've been with Autodesk for just almost a year. And I got my start actually in the contact center doing technical support, about 20 years ago. Spent 10 years in the contact center and then moved away to do product, and was lucky enough to do product at a number of different companies, such as NetApp and EMC, and as well as Salesforce. But then had this opportunity to join Autodesk and kind of get back to my support roots to help out the people where I got my start and be able to develop products that will make their lives easier.
Fantastic. Dave, if you could introduce yourself and maybe even tell us a little bit about what Autodesk does for those who may or may not know what Autodesk is.
Sure. So Dave Harris, Director of Strategic Programs. I started with Autodesk in 1999, actually. So when they spun off a .com initiative called Buzzsaw.com. Autodesk as a company is focused on making anything, would be the easiest way to say it. So the software that we make is used to design anything from airplanes to cars to every building you probably see in the city. So we actually specialize in different industries, so construction, manufacturing. We also have a media and entertainment business. So when you see the Academy Awards come up and there are awards for special effects, usually it's 5 out of 5 for the companies that have used our software. From a sort of grand vision standpoint, it's really about building the software that allows people to build anything else in the world.
So thank you. Glad you guys are both here. So 45% in the survey that we do with the state of Salesforce, if you haven't seen that survey and that asset, you can pick one up at our booths and in any of the Blue Wolf IBM sessions that or you can stop by our sort of headquarters at Dreamforce, which is Situ over at MoMA, which is right across the street behind Moscone. But in our survey, it says 45. Of the people we surveyed, 45% had moved to Lightning. And if I think about Lightning, as I was getting ready to prepare for this session over the last couple of months, I've paid attention, and we were in a client site, not Autodesk, but a client site recently that was talking about, they are on Salesforce Classic, and they were talking about all the transformations that they want, all the things that they want to do, all the cool things that Salesforce does that they're not taking advantage of. And as we began to talk, it became clear that they were not on Lightning, and what that meant to the ability to improve around knowledge management and the ability to improve around Omni and all the different pieces that Lightning comes to. So one of the things we will talk about today is not only, although my marketing team didn't want us to call it the good, the bad, and the ugly, the reality of Lightning is not always easy, but the results and the capabilities that you accomplish beyond it is always seems, at least the clients that we talk to, it's always worth it. There's always going to be a glitch. There's always going to be a problem. But we're going to talk about that today. In some ways, if you have Salesforce without Lightning, it's like buying a Mercedes and deciding that you really didn't want the special packages, you just wanted a basic Mercedes. It's still a Mercedes, but it just doesn't have all the cool bells and whistles. And that's the way that I figuratively talk about Lightning. So Mike and Dave, how did you come to the decision to migrate to Lightning? Like, what was the process around that?
Sure. So Autodesk right now is focused on two key initiatives that span across the entire company. So one is really embracing the idea of becoming a true customer company, and the other one is actually completing a true digital transformation. And so as part of that, we're doing all sorts of initiatives across the company to say, where can we improve to be able to go faster, deliver better value to our customers, and actually our internal employees as well. So the tipping point for us, some of it was involved in the fact that we're spending an awful lot of time and energy on optimizing the front end experience for our customers. So we're developing AI and machine learning to do dynamic text analysis when customers enter cases to route them effectively. We're spending lots of time on the front end experience in terms of self-help and building out the contextual delivery of help. But for us, what we realized is that as we began to go down that journey with all of the different technology that was out there, everybody was building towards Lightning. So Lightning became a critical component for us to be successful in the future. And to kind of pile on the car analogy, a little bit of what we were seeing was, we're building a Lamborghini on the front end and then driving it in a school lane. So we actually had to optimize the back end for our reps with the idea that actually the actions they could take through Lightning and the configurability that Lightning gave us was ultimately going to result in happier reps and a much better customer experience ultimately.
I mean, I'll just add that, one of the things that you guys probably aren't aware of, Lightning's been available for some time, but I think really it was really Lightning for sales and, really growing that a lot. And I really think probably within the last year, I think Lightning has really matured enough so that Service Cloud can really take full advantage of all that capabilities. So, the time to move to Lightning, if you're on Service Cloud, I really think is now.
So, tell us about the selection criteria that you had in selecting a partner. Like, how did you come about to choose Blue Wolf to help you with this?
Yeah, so the first thing I said was, let's find a company that has a cool name, because I want, So I think
they chose Blue Wolf, who's been bought by IBM, and IBM is a cool name. So, yes.
They're both cool names. Blue Wolf's maybe a little bit cooler, I'll be honest, but that's, So that was the first part of it. The second one was actually taking a look at the company and their duration in the Salesforce space, specifically what have they done in relation to Lightning. And so Blue Wolf, their duration as a consulting practice in the Salesforce space, very long. The customers we talked to had a very positive opinion of their experiences. So that was a good starting point for us. I think the third thing for me was really, I'll call it spider sense. I'm sure that's an industry standard term. But the idea was actually when we first engaged with Blue Wolf, I wanted to get a sense of how are they going to approach this. And quite honestly, rather than get a lot of salesmanship and bells and whistles about how great the company was, it pretty much quickly transitioned to how can we make you successful and what are the keys to your success. And then the last thing that I would say that was very attractive for us was actually the description and the phasing and the approach that Blue Wolf was going to take. And so we actually engaged them as a kind of a two-stage process. And there was a blueprint process that we went through that really focused on identifying, who were the target customers internally, what were those personas, what were each of those problems, and we ended up with coming away from it with 4 personas, and watching our internal reps interact with the Blue Wolf team, it was a very positive experience, and you felt that, rather than kind of staying at a higher level, we got right into the weeds on things very quickly, and you could tell that the internal folks really appreciated that because we were really living a day of the life in terms of the pain that they're feeling. So for us, and to me, having the flexibility in terms of how we engage with Blue Wolf as well, because came to them and said, well, we weren't sure exactly what we wanted to do in terms of part of it, all of it, how were they going to integrate with our internal team? We have a very strong internal SFDC team, and so being able to work through those options and not having anything sort of just jammed at us in terms of saying here's the one way to do it was a very positive experience for us.
So with regards to those internal resources, how was Blue Wolf resources similar or dissimilar from the people that you already had on your team?
Yeah, we worked with our internal team to do a comparison. We actually kind of did this, without each side totally, or it wasn't a specific exercise, but we asked them, how would you approach it, and then how would Blue Wolf approach it. The modeling around the resourcing and the approach was pretty similar, so that made us feel pretty good. We also brought in our internal SFTC team to help do the evaluation. So we had a couple sessions where it was kind of the ask me anything when it came to the technology and all that. Because really for us it was super important that our internal SFTC team felt very comfortable and was aligned with the approach.
How did you bring? This is not one of the questions, but how did you bring your frontline and your, like when you're trying to make those kind of decisions? Who was in that room that was part of your resource team? Like who was in? Was that business in the room, or was that just IT in the room? But who was in the room during that?
I was going to say I could just point them out actually, because a lot of them are sitting right over there. But so for us, it was actually a combination of business and technical.
Okay.
So on the business side, it was making sure that there was alignment in terms of the objectives, what the end state deliverable was going to look like. On the technical side, for us, it was a combination of our development resources, engineering manager, technical architecture, to make sure that they were feeling okay in terms of everything that was the approach that was being laid out technically.
So, Mike, what were some of the challenges you felt would arise prior to the start of the project? Like, what were some of the things that you expected that you were going to have to deal with?
Well, yeah, well, it's really interesting. I actually started. Day one for me was in January, and then day two wound up being a project kickoff, which was kind of nice. Yeah, no, it was great, and I was very impressed with Blue Wolf's sort of approach to the alignment blueprint and just following the customer journey. As I sort of dug in more on the Autodesk environment, I really trying to figure out where the sticky areas were, the problem areas. I kind of found four things that gave me concern. The first one was really around the complex nature. I want to say, we're, as David mentioned, we're Autodesk. We're makers, right? So we have a very highly customized instance of Salesforce. A lot of customizations. I'll go so far as to say that we actually had Lightning Service Console 5 years ago. When there wasn't one, because we custom built it, because we saw what Lightning was there, we saw some potential, and then we built it. It was good work, and it didn't age as well, I think, over the past 5 years, just because of all the advancements that Salesforce had made to Lightning, and bringing Service Console up to speed. But sort of the complex nature of a lot of the custom configuration, that was one of the concerns that I had. Bringing all that over, making sure it's functional in the Lightning environment was one concern. Second, I think, was really kind of our environment. Show of hands, I think, and Autodesk people don't get to raise, but who thinks they have a complex environment, right? A Salesforce environment, right? Because we've got a development environment where a lot of our all of our development occurs, right? Then everything needs to get checked in there. Then we have an integration environment where things like Siebel and SAP and all of our payment systems, everything that integrates into Salesforce. On top of that, we have a pre-production stage. So you have to then deploy code into dev, then integration, then into pre-production stage, and that's where all our QA, as well as our user testing goes before we go live into our final environment, which is production. So it's quite a lot of steps that have to go right in order for for this to be able to be successful. So I had concerns around just sort of all the migration into the different environments, especially since as any company, we're trying to move quickly, and we don't necessarily always synchronize the environments as much as possible. So what might be present in one environment may not be present in another, and that that configuration misconfiguration might cause issues with deployments, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think the third concern that I had was really around Lightning Knowledge. Some of you be aware that Lightning Knowledge is completely different, in the Salesforce, in the Lightning environment, and it's a one-way move. So knowledge being such a critical part of what our agents do on a daily basis, they generate articles not just for internal consumption, but also for our Autodesk Knowledge Network, which serves up thousands and thousands of pages and articles to thousands of customers daily. And we need to make sure that as we migrate across, it's a one-way move. We got to get that right, because there's no fallback, there's no rollback. And so I had some concerns around making sure that the migration, went of the knowledge itself went smoothly. I think lastly was also the this idea of engagement. How do you get stakeholders engaged? I mean, how many of you have done projects where you generate requirements and you look at all all the pieces to make your product successful, and then you build it and no one comes, right? You build it and everybody grumbles about it. Everybody nobody wants to use it, and that's how do you get those users engaged? And that was another concern that I had. But we'll address those, I think, in subsequent slides. But I just wanted to illustrate the four things that I was concerned about.
So you talked about some things that you were worried about. You sort of expected that I have some concerns here. What are some of the things that you guys dealt with that were unexpected that came along throughout the process?
I mean, I'll say that one thing that I didn't see was kind of a DevOps. We have internally what we feel is a fairly well understood, process to say push into the different environments to check in code and migrate code from one environment to the next environment up to stage. And I think looking back on it, I think we would have probably tried to spend a little bit more time, bringing Blue Wolf up because no migration goes perfectly, right? I mean, not everything's going to be unicorns and rainbows. Every now and then you're going to run into a donkey, and no offense to anybody who's a donkey fan here, but it just happens. And one of those things that we learned was the push and the code reviews and all the configuration push into different environments didn't always go as smoothly as we had hoped. And so I think the one thing that I would say that we didn't see that I caution you guys is to make sure that your deployment process that you have, if you have a complex one, that you really go through it in great detail and make no assumptions about maybe the partner that you choose that's coming in, that they're going to have a good understanding of it. I mean, again, it's a challenge that we took head on. We got past it. But it was something that I actually just took it for granted that it was just gonna work, and that was I think a miss on my part personally.
So, one of the things that you and I talked about, if I remember correctly, was the concept that in the middle of this process, you were still having to do mission critical kind of work in Salesforce. It's a little bit like changing the tires while the bus is rolling. How did you allot for that or take care of that in being successful?
I mean, one of the nice things about Blue Wolf coming in is they bring in their own their dev resources, their QA resources, a lot of things. But again, to bring it into the environment still requires engagement from our Salesforce team, right? And our Salesforce team needs to do things like code reviews, check-ins, and helping them with the deployment into our production environment, because obviously we're not going to let an external partner just come and push code into production. Not a good practice. There were some situations that I think it is challenging to plan for this, but business happens, and you'll get mission critical issues that come up where it's an all hands on deck, and everybody's got to jump in and solve this problem, and nobody works on anything else. And that did happen during our program, where the Salesforce team that normally helps us with deployment, again, not writing the code or configuration for the migration, but just helps with the deployment stuff, got pulled into solving a mission critical crisis that was affecting a lot of our users. Again, it's difficult, I think, to plan for that, but business happens, and if you can, try to account for some of that in this project schedule as you plan it. So it's always better to finish ahead of time. You build in extra time and finish ahead of time than have the project run over. So
you've talked a lot about Blue Wolf, and thank you for being positive about our approach. But what are some of the things that perhaps that Blue Wolf brought to you that wasn't expected, or helped you go through things that you listed 4 things you were worried about, but what did they bring that maybe you hadn't thought of?
Yeah, well, I did list engagement as a big concern of mine, And what I really thought that Blue Wolf brought to the table was their approach to change management and learning, so their CMNL process, which I thought was just really well thought out and really engaged our users pretty well. You know, we brought them in and we did a lot of very detailed reviews with the stakeholders, with agents themselves. You know, not bringing in architects or only or managers only or whatever, but the people who are at the front lines and you know, using the interface every day, bringing them in and engaging them. You know, they had this idea of doing local champions. And really what that is, you know, we have 800 agents that are spread over all across the world, you know, using this interface. And, you know, I mean, it's one thing, I think, to you know, make the change and make a change to your CRM and then push the change down to you. But, you know, you're going to get local resistance. You know, people just, how many people like change? How many people love change? Right? I mean, that is not something that people, you know, take lightly, and people love to, you know, have their own ways of doing things. They figured it out, and, you know, don't change me. But having this idea of a local champion by grabbing or identifying leaders within each call center and each site globally, we're able to bring them in very early into the process. We're not, you know, they're in on, you know, the first sprint, you know, doing early UAT and, you know, getting feedback and all these different things. And just having this structure, this idea of having this champion, they can be then the local expert and the local person, the first line of defense for when your agents run into issues. Then they know who they can go to. Oh yeah, I can go to Paulo, because Paulo is a champion, and, you know, because he went through a lot of this stuff. And if I have a problem or I have a question, I go to him. And Paulo feels empowered that, you know, like, yeah, you know what, I know this thing, and I know what your problem is, and I know why you don't like it, and I can work with you on it. And if he can then, you know, help them solve the issue or not, then he can escalate back towards me in order to get things resolved. But I think also there's one thing
So talking about what you're talking about, I'll add one more that happens in a contact center world. Contact people talk to other people. If you've got a contact center of 300 or 500 that's in the same room, it's called I call it the break room communications plan. It's the difference between what you're telling them and what they're telling each other. And so I've seen that champion concept work so well, because what you're able to do is to get a team of, and on that team of champions, it's just as important in my mind for you to get the most positive person in the contact center on the team as it is to get perhaps the person that always talks about how bad things are and how they're never going to get any better. And because if I can win them over in the beginning, and I can win them over as a champion, then I have the ability to then, when we roll out, I know that in the break room, which is where stuff really gets talked about, that or on chat nowadays or on Slack, that the reality is that they're going to be the champion for the positive instead of the negative, because it's just the nature of the contact center space.
And I think one other aspect that Blue Wolf brought was, you know, I mean, engagement is about just getting the agents themselves really invested in the process, and also having fun with it. You know, one of the things that they suggested, we talked about and we implemented, was we did a console renaming contest. You know, so we have our console, you know, our Salesforce app internally, and, you know, it's understandably got a little bit of baggage associated with it over time. People, you know, everybody makes fun of it and whatever else. But, you know, so we sent a survey out and got a bunch of really great names, you know, to come back in, and just getting a lot of good, really high response rate from the agents, because they wanted to be part of it. Didn't hurt that we incentive with a little prize at the end, you know, for whoever's name get picked. I have to say, one of the we got a lot of really funny names. I mean, my favorite one was Console McConsoleface. You know, which I think if you wound up putting that out as to vote on, it would have probably won by a landslide. I think leadership might have had a problem with it, so we didn't put it out. But, you know, it was great, and we identified the console name that we wanted, and we voted on it. It won by a large margin. And again, it drives engagement, it drives interest, it drives buzz around the process. And like I said, this is something that Blue Wolf really brought that I really appreciated.
I'll add one thing too. I think the approach to requirements gathering and the artifacts that were created as part of that process was also very clean and precise, is how I would describe it. So the end result of what we when we went through our initial blueprint process was a series of personas that actually showed some screen design, some mock-ups. As part of that, underneath each of those, it was kind of, okay, what are the top 10 problems that you're experiencing on a daily basis, and how are we going to solve that with the Lightning design? And so being able to read that back in a very easy and clean and presentable way, it really resonated with our executives, and most importantly, it really resonated with the people that were in the call centers themselves. They actually felt that they had been heard, that they had a level of confidence that we were on the right track, and honestly, that just helped smooth things out through the rest of the program. Because the other challenge that I would say is always there for us is, we run through cycles. So, January, for example, that's the last month of the year, which, we're 1 month off from other companies sometimes in terms of the fiscal calendar. But because of that, we have to pay attention to the ebbs and flows of people's availability. And so having that excitement actually helped us, I think, push through some of those windows of time when maybe we had limited availability for key resources. So it was well received.
So what advice do you give to those in the room that are considering moving to Lightning? What kind of advice do you have for them?
For doing it themselves? Sorry.
Yeah, considering if they're considered doing it themselves. Sorry.
Well, what I would say is we have done, we did the sales cloud side of it and the service cloud side differently. So we had our internal team, do the initial push into Lightning. And so what I would say, and my honest recommendation would be, just bring in a partner or two to at least have the conversation to see what it is that they can actually bring to the table. One of the things that I would say is I think there's value in doing that, just in terms of it may spark some ideas for yourself in terms of how you want to approach it. For example, just seeing the blueprint approach that Blue Wolf had, it really resonated because there was a series of specific gates and activities, and the way to organize around it felt pretty comfortable. So, and even if we hadn't moved forward with Blue Wolf, we likely would have used some elements of what we learned during that engagement to make the project go smoother. I think the other challenge for us, and I'm sure other organizations have this, is because we have Salesforce as a dynamic environment where it's being used multiple organizations across the company. Certainly, when there is a problem, we've had incidents where for whatever reason something on the entitlement side wasn't working. There is a pulling function that will result as part of that, understandably so, because we're prioritizing fixing the things we have to fix. But that can, in some cases, in my mind, also lead to an extended duration. So I think one of the advantages for us was really being able to try and compress some of the work up front. Now there is obviously the transition to run mode back to our internal SFDC team, which is really, so that's why it's important to have them along every step of the way. But I think even if you're not going to go this route and you have really sophisticated competencies within your own company, it's great. I actually think it's still worth having the conversation at the very least, just to kind of tweak some ideas for you.
Have you guys seen, I didn't mean to interrupt, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, if you're looking to do this yourself, I think it's achievable, but really have a dedicated team. Because this, doing this is if you want to complete it within any kind of reasonable amount of time, it is more than a full-time project that needs dedicated resources. Because as Dave said, just business happens, and if you're using shared resources, they are going to get pulled off into something else, switching context, all these different things is going to have negative effects. One of the things that some of the challenges that our sales team I think had was they're kind of in year 3 of their migration to Lightning, and that's a choice they made to use internal resources, shared resources, but that's that was fine, that worked for them, and that's great. It wasn't something that we looked at, and wasn't the direction that we wanted to go, and so that's why we elected to bring an external resource in.
I truthfully cannot remember the answer to this question, so I may be setting myself up for a bad answer. But how long did it take you with us? How long was your migration process from that Blue Wolf, that blueprint, where you're trying to make a decision, you're trying to put together a plan to being live?
Yeah, I think that because we're in the process of starting the rollout ourselves for the full thing on the Service Cloud side, or for the full rollout on the Service Cloud. So maybe I'm thinking sort of a 6-month-ish, somewhere around there is kind of where I think we're going to end up. I do think for us, again, the consideration for our rollout is also impacted like our end of year. So and so we're purposefully making choices to not push forward when we probably could, in some cases, go a little bit faster. But I think it's, for us, we're very comfortable with the outcome, and we actually are, for us, the other consideration that was different on the support versus sales side is they had a very firm desire to try and do it all at once for given locations or given disciplines within the support. On the sales side, they were more flexible. So for a while, what they were doing is they were actually rolling out, and then in some cases, they would roll back to Classic for some of the sales reps. Support is much more, we want to go one direction and burn the boats and not go back. So that's one of the things that made the dynamics a little different.
So what were some of the outcomes from the migration that you've seen? What have you seen positively?
I have to say that, and I think I want to credit Blue Wolf to this, is that
That's okay. You can not credit us for everything.
For the change management process, really, I think, like I said, just drove a level of engagement, with the users, which I think is going to pay off really strong dividends at the end with adoption. I mean, at the end of the day, our rollout is planned for early next year. We're gonna push it out, and no deployment is ever going to go 100% smoothly, right? But again, the level of engagement you have, the idea that we have with champions, the engagement model that we had with all the agents, giving them the chance to give input and everything like that, even if it isn't perfect, I think you get a lot more wiggle room. You get a lot more, sort of just credit for being able to at least engage them and not try to cram something down their throat. And I think that a lot of the agents will have a higher tolerance for things that aren't quite working as well when you engage them in this manner. So I think that to me, I think I'm really looking forward to that.
So we've got about 8.5 minutes left. Do you guys have questions? We've got a couple of more points to make, but do you have questions that may be specific that you want to ask that we can see if we can answer? Anyone have a question specific to your opportunity? No? Then we must be doing amazing work at telling you how to do this process.
Quick question.
Yes.
So you mentioned about the Sales Cloud and how you did it differently for Service Cloud. What would you have recommended to the Sales Cloud, like if they were to do something differently?
I mean, I don't necessarily have the full vision into what with the challenge that the Sales Cloud had during that time. I do understand that when they started, again, Lightning probably wasn't quite mature enough yet, right? So it really wasn't able to have all the pieces together that the sales team needed. So it really sort of stretched some of that deployment migration process out. It really through no fault of their own, right? Going through coming into Lightning maybe before it was mature enough. So I mean, the only, as I'd indicated, if you're able to have a team that's developed, a development team that's dedicated towards something like this, and again, if Lightning was Lightning is still an evolving beast in a lot of ways, right? Some of it I've heard it sometimes equated to building like a scaffolding while the platform is like moving under, with you, and that's proof of some instability. So if Lightning is mature enough, which I think it absolutely is now on the service side and definitely on the sales side, they're moving on to some really incredible things over there. But from a timing perspective, I would say that from the sales team, it just they probably couldn't have moved much faster even if they wanted to.
The one thing I would add too is I really do think I can't emphasize enough the idea of actually bringing in UX discipline and really taking a look at what it is you're trying to accomplish in a very focused way. I have an opinion. I'd be curious to see what the SFDC team would say, but I think that maybe we were not as strong out the gate on the sales side, partially because it was new technology. We hadn't done it before, so we really didn't know the right way to approach it. And so, as we've gone through it on the Service Cloud side, really sitting down and looking at this as a product, a product that you are going to evolve, and what is the person going to be doing on a daily basis? Where are the buttons? We have done comparisons to certain elements of the sales implementation, and we call it the scroll of death or something like that, where it takes too far to get to the key the key field or the report you want to access or anything else. And so I really do think that the UX part of it cannot be understated, and for us that was actually a learning in general. We have a long and glorious tradition of walking past our internal systems and just saying, oh, find a way to do it. And then you'd sit down with one of our reps and you'd watch them try to execute a transaction or support a customer. They're popping up 5 screens. They're jumping between 9 different locations. I mean, it's actually mind-boggling how they can even keep it all straight. So the idea of really focusing on that UX and what does the end state really want to look like and how do you drive efficiencies there, to me, is critical. And so regardless of Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, that would be, if there's one point to walk away from in terms of what I think has helped us be successful with the Service Cloud, it's really focusing on that up front.
Yeah, I think it's that opportunity to rethink Salesforce, to rethink your organization, and at the level of watching, like you said, spending time with your agents, with your frontline folks, and watching them do their work, and figuring out that you can make it better with Lightning, or you can make it better now that you're rethinking Salesforce. So just from a time element, we'll continue. So 3 key takeaways. I'll let you guys sort of add color to these. The first one that we came up with was Lightning greatly improves the efficiency and overall experience for internal support teams. Why did you say that? What was the key to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that actually, so what we've done is we've done comparisons between the old process and the new process. So we were trying to figure out how we define the definition of success, and for us it was around efficiency, but it was also around rep satisfaction. And so we have the side by side, the old process and how it's going to work in Lightning, and you look at it and it's truly night and day. And I can tell you that for our internal teams that have been working on this, the same systems, looking at the same screens for the past decade, that gain in efficiency, it's a gain in efficiency, it's also a gain in just happiness and life satisfaction. And it's definitely, impacting the second one, right, which is, happier teams are going to lead to happier customers. So, and that, that's sort of through all levels of the organization. So the managers are excited about having more effective reporting. The reps are just excited about not having to deal with 19 screens on 4 different applications. And, again, I'm not sure even how they manage to do what they do. I have great admiration for them. But really, it's around actually making them happy. And we think that results in, that's going to flow downstream to our customers, just make things better for everybody.
I think about a conversation that I had with an agent in a UAT, and after a similar example, and she calls me over and goes, is this really what we're going to use, or is this something that you guys designed that you're thinking about rolling out? And I'm like, no, this is the Lightning console. This is what it's going to look like when you go live in 2 weeks. And she goes, wow, my life got a whole lot easier. And that's the happiness you're looking for, right? I want my life to be a whole lot easier than it was. I can only imagine if it had been 10 years since you guys had really rethought. The last one is happier customer equals increased revenue and happier executives. Tell me about why you think it would be happier executives.
Let me say this. I think every executive I know just loves spending money on infrastructure projects, right? So that's the favorite thing in the world. But what I would say is that it's pretty easy for us to calculate the end value on this, because the efficiency is going to lead to us being able to have greater throughput. And for us also, we track very closely the SLAs and the response time that we have with our customers. And we have multiple levels, like many companies, based on what type of account you have, what type of offering you have. We actually will have a better tool set and be able to respond more effectively. And the last thing for us is actually by getting our support teams on Lightning, we're able to actually elegantly connect them with our sales team. And so, it's not just sort of making it up and saying there's increased revenue. What we have been able to do is facilitate a bi-directional handoff, via warm transfer, which is much better for the customer, but also it's enabled the sales teams to engage on leads that are coming out of our support side, and it's enabled the sales teams to close deals more effectively because of a higher satisfaction rate for our customers when they've been handed off to support. And that's really all about building that bridge. And so, and that's one of the reasons for us why I think going forward, there's now internal recognition of the fact that we need to treat this as a product, a true product for our internal teams, which again is just, we are fantastic at designing a great many products that our end customers use. we've paid next to no attention to the experience of our internal teams. So the idea that we're forcing productization upon ourselves for our internal systems, to me, is really a huge win. And I think people are going to be more willing, those executives who don't like to spend the money are going to be more willing to revisit continued investment in that space, because what they're going to be able to see is an actual sort of bottom line realization that it was worth the investment.
So once again, just thank you guys for coming and spending the time with us to share with folks your experience. I know that when I walked away from these kind of sessions at conferences, I always felt like one of two things. I either felt really good about my situation, that I wasn't as bad as they were, or I felt really bad about my situation and I needed to learn from you. So hopefully it was somewhere in between today that folks get that opportunity. You can talk with me if you've got questions, if you want to engage around Blue Wolf. You can look for us in the booths. We're at booths, and we just thank you for coming and spending time with us today.
Thanks, everybody.